Once he reached his mid-30s, the joy of traveling began to wear thin for Satchel. He found himself longing for a more settled life and the comforts of a home. In 1941, he finally found it in the warm smile and tender heart of Lahoma Brown. Satch rested his travel-weary legs and happily began his second career as husband and father. But even though he had finally found what he thought he'd been searching for, it was only a year before he took to the road again and his first and only true love, baseball. His family would have to wait. Satchel's teammates were in love with the game too, and out of that love grew players better than anyone could dream. His teammates included Cool Papa Bell, a hitter who ran bases so fast if you blinked you'd swear he'd never left home plate. Oscar Charleston, who was an outsider who could tell just where a ball would land as soon as it hit the bat. And then there was Josh Gibson, who some said could hit a ball so hard and so far it would land somewhere in the middle of next week. Because of his powerful hitting and home run record, Josh was sometimes called the Black Babe Ruth. But many wondered if the Babe should have been called the White Josh Gibson. Back in 1923, when Gibson and Satch were teammates on the Pittsburgh Crawfords, they were considered a mighty powerful duo. Posters for the Crawfords read, "Josh Gibson and Satchel Paige, the greatest battery in baseball." Gibson guaranteed to hit 2 home runs, and Paige guaranteed to strike out the first 9 men. "Someday we'll meet up and see who's best," they would often joke with each other. In 1942, soon after Satchel's return to the road, they got their chance. It was September 10th, 1942, the second game of the Negro World Series. Satch's team, the Kansas City Monarchs, was in a heated best-of-7 matchup against the Homestead Grays, led by Josh Gibson. Toward the end of the game, Satch decided to raise the stakes. With 2 outs in the inning and 1 man on base, he walked 2 players on the bases, so the bases would be loaded when Josh Gibson came up to bat. "Someday we'll meet up and see who's the best," rang in Satch's ears as he prepared to face the men who would now determine the fate of his team and Satch's reputation. Satchel called to Josh, "Remember back when we were playing with the Crawfords and you said you was the best hitter in the world and I was the best pitcher?" "Yeah, I remember," called Josh back. "Well, now we're going to see what's what," Satch said. With a ball in hand and a grin on his face, Satch told Josh, "I'm going to throw a fastball, let her high." "Strike 1." Josh shook his head, tightened his grip on the bat, and resumed his position as he tried to stare into Satchel's eyes. But Satch stared straight ahead at Josh's knees. His coach back at the Mount Meek School had always told him, "Look at the knees, Satch. Every weakness a batter has, you can spot in the knees." "Now I'm going to throw this one a little faster and belt high," Satch said during his wind-up. "Strike 2." In typical Satch style, he called in a mocking voice, "Now I got you 0-2, and I'm supposed to knock you down, but instead I'm going to throw a pea at your knee. Strike 3." Josh moved the bat. Satch slowly exhaled the breath he'd been holding since the wind-up. It was over. He'd done what he'd come to do. "Nobody hit Satchel's fastball," he said through a smile as bright as the sun, "and nobody ever will." Throughout his life, Satch had always felt that most rules were made just to keep him from getting his fair share. Major leaguers who'd seen him play told Satch, "We could use you, if only you were white." The first time he heard it, his stomach boiled over till his insides hurt, but as always, pitching was his medicine for all his aches and pains. When the rules against blacks playing in the major leagues finally changed, Satch was one of the first in line to get what he felt he had earned. On July 7th, 1948, his 42nd birthday, the Cleveland Indians offered Satch a gift he'd never forget, a pitching spot in the major leagues. Satch accepted, but he had made and followed his own rules for so long, it was hard for him to play someone else's game. "It seems like the majors were all about rules. Rules about exercise. Shaking hands with the catcher is all the exercise I need," Satch would insist. "Rules about following the catcher's signals. There ain't no need for signs. All you got to do, show me a glove and hold it still. I'll hit it," he would tell his coach. And more rules about being on time for practices, for games. In exhibition games during the offseason, Satch had left no doubt in anyone's mind who was the best pitcher in any league. Other players would watch him, some even studied him, but for Satch, good playing had nothing to do with rules. Pitching was a gift he was born with. It was buried deep in his bones, and you couldn't learn it or even shake it. It was just there. It was only 2 seasons later when Satch pitched his final innings for the major leagues. His age and his difficulty with the rules made both of those seasons extra challenging, but even with the best of his pitching years behind him, he gave the Cleveland Indians a boost. He pitched for them in a World Series and throughout both seasons. All who wanted a glimpse of the tall, lean legend named Satch could get it for just the price of a ticket. From fans to future players, everyone who saw him play took away images so fresh and clear they might as well have been color snapshots. When the cheers started to fade, Satch never did. For the next 12 years, he played on any team that would have him and his satchel full of pitches. In 1953, baseball finally closed its doors to Satch. The Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, New York, opened theirs to him in 1971. He was the first Negro League player they honored, and he had one of the longest and brightest careers in baseball history.